brothers, sisters. In this video, I'd like to share with you what I've learned from being reckless. Now, in recent years, in the past 6, 7 years, I haven't been as reckless physically and in society as I once was before that 7 years. Starting about the age of 15, I fell off the spiritual path. I started very young, at the age of 8, studying the different religions. I started out with Buddhism, and I was interested in Buddhism and poetry. And through middle school, I had interests and desires, intellectual desires, that my peers did not have. So I began to have a pessimistic worldview once I hit freshman year in high school. Now, this is a long time ago. I graduated high school in 2010. But, 19, between the ages of 15 and 19, there were some very transformative years for me because I learned a lot. Now, I was reckless in many ways. I took a lot of drugs that I don't take anymore. I drank as much as I want. I stole a lot of things if I wanted it. I had as much sex as I wanted, just not desiring any person, but desiring just that. I never sexually assaulted anybody, but I was very loose in my morality, and I didn't really care who I hurt emotionally. And I did many other crimes, and I have an element attached to my heart that is regret. I'm not going to go into everything that I did, but there is regret that I have attached, to my heart when I reflect upon my life. Now, in recent years, in the last 7 years I've been very spiritually open to many different sources of tradition, many different sources of explanations for the cosmos, where it all came from, the source, God, spirits, and I have researched and just taken in all this information without really filtering it. As in, I will analyze and study anything, even if it's texts like the Necronomicon that are very chaotic and induce a certain level, a little bit for most people, a little bit for me anyway, of insanity. Because there is something behind a lot of the traditions of our ancient ancestors. Now, there's not an idea of everything being evil that was from other sources besides monotheism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, all the Abrahamic faiths. They like to ascribe evil to certain things. But spiritual traditions of our ancestors are much more complicated than good and evil. Now, the Aesir and Asatru, the gods of our Northern European ancestors, are generally considered gods of consciousness and good. But there are certain levels of goodness that we just don't see from their vantage point. I read recently in Swami Vivekananda's Practical Vedanta book, that I will probably read from in another playlist, that said that if you are on a vantage point on top of a mountain, on a peak, the difference between a blade of grass and a human being will be the same. They'll seem equally distant and equal height. Because a vantage point high up will be able to see with true perspective on everything below it. And it's very important to understand that the gods see through a higher perspective than we do. That is why when somebody mows the grass and when somebody pushes people out of the land, it seems like the same thing from a high vantage point. That doesn't mean the gods aren't aware of what's happening. They just know the grander scope of all that is happening. And this can be very scary for us on our level, because if gods are perceiving us from that vantage point, how can we expect them to have mercy upon us? And now, I have learned that there is far more mercy in the gods, and through the source, which is the source of everything, and our connection to it still exists. We just have to grab onto it. There's far more mercy than I previously thought. I found that despite the gods being at a high vantage point, the gods being part of the one God, which everything is ultimately a part of, just to varying degrees, varying magnitudes, the gods are closer to the source, closer with connection. I found that the gods do have quite a bit of mercy, but they see the different influences that have an effect on people down here in a way that we may view as being unmerciful. But I've learned something from being reckless in my teenage years and spiritually reckless in recent years, as far as different rituals, not really, not really, not really curtailing my practice of different rituals. I've been very reckless in the different rituals I've done, the different connections that I've made, and the Divine Mother Kali Ma, I believe, has protected me from a lot of the mistakes that I've made. I actually feel that protection. And these are mistakes that helped me grow spiritually, but they could have been very bad if I made these connections, solid, and there wasn't a higher force to protect me like the Divine Mother Kali Ma. But what I've learned from my early experience in societal recklessness and my later experience in spiritual recklessness in recent years is that we may receive a lot of mercy from on high, but we must realize that we cannot expect mercy from the world. Now, this may seem pessimistic, but it is actually a preserving element to both our spiritual body and our emotional body. We are preserved when we do not expect things from this world, when we do not expect the world to form into easy to order lines and paragraphs and pages that are clearly divided in sentences and clearly divided in story. And our perception of reality, make no mistake about it, is us telling a story to ourselves, because we don't see reality as it truly is. At least not yet. Maybe one day. Definitely one day. But it is the safest course to not expect mercy from this world, and to honestly not expect mercy from God or the gods, no matter what tradition or religion that you're in. Don't think that it's not about deserving mercy or not deserving mercy. Just don't expect to have your perception of your life fall into place as you wish it to, because it most likely will not happen, because there are grander schemes afoot. And the second part is even more important than the first. Because we cannot expect mercy from the world, that does not mean that we shouldn't show mercy. In fact, it means that we should take agency and give as much mercy as we can to other people. Be nice to them, help them along their way, even if we don't agree with them, even if we have different spiritual beliefs, different political beliefs, different ideas about the world, and different understandings of who we are, no matter how different they are in all these regards. Show mercy, because since we're down here on the ground, and the gods are on high, we cannot expect them to do the work for us. Even if they do sometimes. It's a miracle when they do, and it's quite wonderful when they do, as they have in my life. I should have died so many times, and there's stories that I've told before, so I'm not going to get into that, but I should have died many times. Tried to die many times, but I did not. There was mercy granted to me. The gods were not done with me yet. But this is why, as human beings, we must show mercy to our fellow human beings and to animals and to plants to a certain extent. But because being down here and being in the action sector of our environment, our environment being down here in the material plane, we have the ability to choose and act in a way that is relative to how we see the world. If we believe that there must be more mercy, then we must be merciful. If we believe that there must be more compassion, then we must be compassionate. And if we see a lack of it, we can't just throw up our hands and say, well, this is how the world is. I'm not going to be merciful because the world's not merciful. That is not how we can act. We must act with mercy, compassion, and love. And logic, which compassion and logic are usually seen as two different things, but ultimately, I believe the highest compassion is logical, if you understand it from a proper perspective. So it is up to us as human beings, as freely choosing human beings that aren't just driven by survival instinct like animals, to show mercy to other people, to spread mercy and love and compassion in this world. Because if we don't, we can't just expect God to do the work. We have to be willing to do the work that we want to see in the world. There's so many things that I've learned from being spiritually reckless, and some things that I've learned from being societally reckless, but those things were more about understandings of myself. But from being spiritually reckless, and, I'm not saying that everything that I've done spiritually is bad, or that we can even term it as bad, but I've taken in so much knowledge, and I've learned quite a bit, from many different sources. After analyzing all that, I found that where we are as human beings must always be relative to our highest ideal of the world. What do I mean by this? Our highest ideal of the world, we can't expect our ideals to come down to us. We have to bring this world to that. We can't just compromise on our ideals and say, okay, well, I can't really help that person because, if that man is yelling at his wife, I don't know the context, that's not really my business. Instead of saying, okay, well, if anybody's treating a woman like that, I have to go to say something. You can't bring your ideals down. You must rise up to your ideals. Like Freya, ascending. And there is a place for Freya descending and helping this earth. There's a place for getting down to ground level and making things realistic. But most of the time we have to ascend towards our highest ideals, and doing that requires action in this world appropriate to our beliefs. Now, what I have learned from my emotional struggles during my teen years, and I still have emotional struggles, what I've learned is that I'm actually a better person than I thought I was. Now, for many of my teen years, I was just like, this world is screwed up, I'll be screwed up. This world treats me bad, so I'm going to be bad. Because obviously the world's right. But during the key moments when I could have turned my back, I actually displayed courage that I did not expect from myself. I displayed courage that I didn't really think about. It just happened. I'll name a couple instances. There was this party when I was about 15, 16, in this apartment complex, and I was there. And I was getting along very well with this Mexican dude that I knew. And, I'm only naming ethnicity because it's relevant to the story. And then there was this Aryan Brotherhood, out of prison, white supremacist, that I wasn't getting along with. But there was, obviously the Mexican dude, he tried to be cool with the Aryan Brotherhood guy, but the Aryan Brotherhood guy just wouldn't allow it. They wouldn't allow peace. So they were getting very close to each other, and they were getting in each other's face, and I knew the Mexican dude was about to grab a shotgun. Now, because I knew where he had one, I knew because he said he was going to grab it. So as they started coming closer to each other, there was about 2 feet in between them where I put myself in between, and I was like, okay, come on, this doesn't need to happen, talked them out of it, and then they backed up, and everything was okay. That's, a fairly minor incident, but I knew that it was going to escalate to extreme levels of violence if I did not do something, but I didn't really think about it. And then later on, I realized that my impulse was to do right, even though I believed myself to be bad. And I think that in all human beings, we have this impulse, and it just pops out sometimes without us realizing it. And a lot of the time, we do realize it. We do the right thing because we realized it. But even people who think that they're bad, sometimes their true nature will show itself. And I think that the vast majority of human beings are actually good. Ironically, being reckless, being around bad influences and being around drugs and stuff like that and doing different crimes, I started to see this popping out into people years later when I started reflecting on these experiences. Another case was there was a deal gone bad, and this guy grabbed 2 knives, 2 very big steak knives, and he was walking towards the people that he had a problem with because they were selling bad stuff or like it wasn't real, but that's not important. But he was walking towards them, and they were talking about having a gun behind me. I never saw a gun. But so I walked up to the guy with the 2 steak knives, and he had them like this, and I put my hands on the blades and I held them. And I looked right at him, and I held the blades, and I talked him out of it. And the whole time he was moving these blades, and he was like trying to get them free. He was honestly trying to get them into me, but I was holding them so tight. And I eventually talked him down, and then, later on, after everything just de-escalated, I saw there was cuts on my palms where I had actually held him so tight to make sure that he wouldn't be able to stab anybody. So I didn't really think about that, I just kind of did it. But everybody has this potential in them to do right, to be a good person, and I think it's actually stronger in the vast majority of human beings, like I said. We just have to, and if we cultivate it, it becomes even stronger. It becomes the practice and the perspective that we rely upon. If we rely upon our inherent goodness and fight those fears, desires, and anger that we feed and feed and feed, they become bigger and bigger and kind of overshadow the goodness. And those are the corruptions. Those aren't the true nature of human beings, I don't believe. But if we don't feed those things, and we allow our good nature to shine forth, our true nature. Get rid of all this illusion that surrounds us, all this bodily attachment and attachment to name, fame, wealth, and feeling good, drugs, things like that. If we get rid of all these attachments, there is this pure essence inside all of us. And I've learned that even when I thought I was a bad person and I was trying to be bad, it just kind of came out. And I do credit the gods in a lot of these instances for helping me out. The Divine Mother Kali Ma, for sure, before I even knew her. Odin, possibly, before I even knew him. And you have the gods and the spirits already in you. Your connection that you're about to have or you're going to have, or it's already within you. You just have to bring it out. You just have to be willing to get rid of some attachments that you have that you've built up on the outside of who you truly are. Get rid of those attachments, bring out who you really are. And this is what I've learned from being reckless. What I've learned from being reckless is twofold. One, societally reckless, one, spiritually reckless. And I'll get into the spiritual recklessness later on, but I've also uncovered a lot of spiritual truths that are very unpleasant when it comes to spiritual recklessness, because I've learned quite a bit. And there are certain doors I'm not willing to open, but in the past several years, I've opened quite a few, not like what I found, or saw that it wasn't bad, and I left the ones that I saw that weren't negative, dark, open, and I've closed those doors again that I found that were filled with darkness. But anyway, this video shouldn't be any longer than it is now. In my last video, I said I would address in the next video any question you wanted to ask me if you guessed or if you basically told what I did that was a taboo in the first few several seconds of my last video. And I just wanted to hear some ideas and what you came up with. I wanted to hear your creativity, so I'm going to give that another day or two before I address the winner or the answer to the question in a video. So I'm going to wait a couple days at least for that, and we'll see what happens. I want to give it time to get more than 47 views. But hey, thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, I'm not going to answer a whole lot of specific questions about my past, but if you have any general questions, or if you have any comments, you have any concerns, or you just thought this video was cool, hit that thumbs up and leave a comment. But hey, thank you very much for watching. Hope all of you learned from my mistakes, realize that there is something good in you that you can bring out, that you must bring out to be a great human being. And I will see all of you in the future.